I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are doing a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 2 English lesson on adjectives and adverbs. And before we start with a lesson on adjectives and adverbs, all right. So if we selected the subject of language arts, grade 2, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of adjectives and adverbs. All right, so we are doing adjectives as well as adverbs. And we said our chapter is adjectives and adverbs. Our subject is English, which is language arts, grade 2. And the lessons are going to be where we need to choose between an adjective and an adverb. Uh, and then we, so the lessons is to choose between adjectives and adverb, as well as is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb. All right. So we said that we are doing adjectives and adverbs. And an adjective, right, it tells you about a noun. So an adjective, it basically tells you about the noun, or we can say that it describes or modifies a noun, right? And in adjectives, they often tell you what kind, or they often tell you how many. So our adjective is a word that tells us about the noun. And in an adjective, it often tells us either what kind or it will tell us how many. And if we look at an example, it says Jody saw 3 stars in the sky. So now you ask yourself, how many stars did you see? And then 3 stars, and that is basically an adjective. It describes a noun or it tells us more about the noun. And also when it comes to an adjective, right? An adjective will tell you how many. First, it will tell you how many. It will also tell you what kind, right? And then we have an adverb, which is a word that tells about a verb. All right. And then we said an adverb. It is a word that tells us about the verb. And adverbs they often tell us how, when, or where. And we said that most adverbs that tells us why, that tells us how, they end up in ly. Like hurriedly, gracefully, those are all words that ends with y. So we said that adjectives is a word that tells us about the noun, and an object it often tells you what kind or how many. All right. So overall, we said an adjective is a word that tells us about the noun, and it can tell us often what kind or how many. And then we also have an adverb, which is a word that tells us about the verb, right? And an adverb they often either tell us how, when, or where. And we see that most of the adverbs that tell us how, they end up in ly. And we are doing our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. And then also when it comes to adjectives and adverbs, an adjective we said is part of a speech that modifies a noun, or tells us about a noun, right? Or describes a noun, or even a pronoun. And adjectives, they usually tell us what kind, how many, or which about nouns or pronouns. Where and then we have an adverb, right? It's part of a speech that modifies another adverb, a verb, or a noun. And it is often recognized by the suffix which is ly at the end. All right. And we said an adverb is a part of a speech that modifies another adverb. We see that an adverb, right, um, that ends in ly, it is recognized that if you remember, we said with adjectives, they will tell you how, when, and where. All right. So we said an adjective is part of a speech that modifies a noun or pronoun. Adjectives usually tell us what kind, how many, or which about nouns or pronouns. All right. All right. Oopsie. So when it comes to an adjective and an adverb, right? We said an adjective, right? It describes, modifies, it tells us about the noun. And also adjectives are used to modify a noun. And we said that when it comes to adjective, they ask the question what kind, how many, which one. Oh, and we have an adverbs, right? Adverbs are used to modify the verb as well as the adjectives, as well as other adverbs, right? And adverbs they often ask the question how, when, where, and sometimes to what extent. All right, so now we're going to choose between adjectives and adverbs. So we're going to choose the word that best describes the verb in bold. For example, Shannon saved the dog from the fire. We need to find a similar word. So we need to choose the word that best describes the verb in bold, which is saved. All right. So we said an adjective is a word that tells us about the noun, and it often tells us what kind or how many. And we said when it comes to an adverb is a word that tells you about the verb. They just tell you how, when, where. And the words that ends with how, it usually ends with L, Y. With it usually kicks the ball. So whenever we say that, these adjectives that ask what kind or how many is like either where you, for example, say 1 to 10, 1 to 100, for example, or often several. And then we have adverbs, right? Which tells us how, when, where, right? It's like you either need to walk or run in a certain way. All right, so if we look at that picture that says Shannon saved the dog from the fire. And if we were to change that word in bold, and if we change that word in bold, then we can say Shannon bravely saved the dog from the fire. All right, let's go to our test on choosing between adjectives and adverbs. So we need to choose between adjectives and adverbs. It says choose the word that best describes a noun. So we need to choose the word that best describes a noun in bold, which is train. So we say the train flies along the tracks. And if we best describe those nouns, we can say either quick or quickly. So we choose the word that best describes the noun in bold. The train flies along the tracks. All right. So the train flies along the tracks, or the quickly flies along the tracks. So to choose the word that best describes the noun in bold, the train flies along the tracks. So we can say either the quick flies along the tracks or the quickly flies through the along the sweets. And then also one last one. The do we say the quick flies along the track? The quickly flies along the track. So we can then say that the child flies across the tracks. So do we say quickly? Let's see. The quickly train flies along the tracks. Let's try quickly. So it's actually quick. So the quick train flies along the track. But well done. So quick. Is Owen to be on the new football team? So is Owen going to be on the new six football team? So we need to say is Owen to be on a new football team? So do we say it's gladly to be on the new football team or glad? Let's just go with is glad, right? All right, so now we're going to is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb? And we did say that adjectives, it tells you more about the noun, it gives us the indication of what kind, as well as how many. And we said an adverb, they often tell us how, when, and where. All right. So we're going to look at the word in bold and then an adjective in bold, which is an adjective or an adverb. Yes, is the busy cook works every Saturday. All right. So it says that the clever there right on top, the clever kitten climbs on the table. And remember, we said without, we said when it comes to the adverbs, it tells you how, when, and where. All right, if we look at this one that says the boys danced wildly to the silly song. So danced and wildly to the silly songs. So now you need to ask yourself if it's an adjective or an adverb or even both, right? All right, so now it says, is the word in bold an adjective or is it an adverb? All right. So even the second one where it says the busy cook works every Sunday afternoon, which means that it's an adjective. All right, now let's go to our test. So we're going to the test, right? And now we're going to say, is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb? So we're going to say, is the word in bold an adjective or an adverb? In the new family picture, Clayton smiled brightly. So Clayton smiled brightly. So Clayton having to smile brightly. So smiled brightly. We see that the word is either an adjective or an adverb. In the new family picture, Clayton smiled brightly. In action. All right, so we're going to say it's an adverb because smiled and brightly. So well done. Smiled and brightly. And then is the word in bold an adjective or an adverb? Justin bought a large pot for his plant. And then Justin bought a large pot for his plant. Is this an adjective or an adverb? Justin bought a large pot for his plant. So we need to say, is the large pot an adjective or an adverb? All right. So we'll say it is an adjective, right? Because pot is a noun and large, it basically describes the noun. So well done. So adjective is correct. So well done. Frank has 4 tickets to Sunday's game. Frank has 4 tickets to Sunday's game. Is it an adjective or an adverb? So Frank has 4 tickets to Sunday's game. So Frank has 4 tickets to Sunday's game. Is it an adjective or an adverb? All right, so we can say it's an adjective and it tells you how many, right? It tells you how many because it specifically says 4 tickets, so it tells you how many. And an adjective is correct. So well done. An adjective is correct. So the clever kitten climbs on the table. The clever kitten, is that an adjective or an adverb? So the clever kitten climbed on the table. And if we were to choose if it's an adjective or adverb, all right, then we can say it is an adjective. And it tells us what kind. So well done. It tells you what kind. And then the grumpy sister needs some sleep. The grumpy sister needs some sleep. Is that an adjective or an adverb? The grumpy sister needs some sleep. All right, so if we choose between adjective or an adverb, then we can say it is an adjective, right? Because this one tells us what kind. So what kind of sister? It's a grumpy sister. All right, so we said we are doing adjectives. Adjectives, it tells us more about the noun, and adverbs tells us more about the verb, right? Tells us more about the adjective or another adverb. When it comes to an adjective, right? Adjectives, they either tell us what kind or they tell us how many, and adverbs, they tell us how, when, and where, right? So that is basically the differences between an adjective as well as an adverb. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson, grade 2 on adjectives and adverbs. Thank you very much for joining the class. Have a good evening further. Goodbye.